In the dense hush of a late afternoon in a working-class neighborhood in Ibadan, where the walls between houses were thin and laughter often spilled across rooftops like smoke, 72-year-old Mr. Adebanyo shuffled along the edge of the narrow street. His frame was stooped, his gait slow and deliberate, as if the weight of the years was something he physically carried on his shoulders. As he passed by, a cluster of teenagers gathered near a corner kiosk, Daniel, Ife, and Yomi among them there. Voices dropped, then spiked again in cruel amusement. "Look, it's the ghost again," one jeered, too loudly. "Why doesn't he just die already?" Another added, drawing hoots of laughter. The nickname had stuck over the years, Ghost Man. It wasn't just his silence or his limp or the disrepair of his crumbling bungalow that earned it. It was the eerie solitude he wrapped around himself like a second skin. He spoke to no one, kept no visitors, and hadn't appeared at a community gathering in over a decade. That night, under the cover of a cloudy moon, the boys dared each other closer to his gate. They crept toward the rusted fence with stones clutched in sweaty palms, adrenaline masking their hesitation. One rock flew first, then another, and the crack of glass answered back like a warning. Inside the dark house, a light flicked on. The outline of Mr. Adebanyo appeared in the window frail, motionless, eyes unseen behind dusty panes. The boys stifled their giggles until something shifted behind him. Not a shadow, not a flicker, but the distinct movement of another presence. Deeper within the house, Yomi's breath caught. He grabbed Daniel's arm. "Wait, I thought he lived alone." The laughter died on their lips. They stared in silence, the night suddenly colder than before. Daniel, 17, and simmering with the kind of restlessness that comes from too many questions and not enough answers, navigated life in their small Ibadan neighborhood with a mix of sharp wit and quiet rage. He lived with his mother, Ruth, a weary but determined nurse who often came home too tired to speak, and his younger sister, Tolu, who was the only person capable of coaxing a genuine smile out of him. Tolu, at just 10, looked up to Daniel with the unshakable belief that he could fix anything: broken remotes, missing homework, even their broken family. Their father had vanished years ago, leaving behind a faded photograph and a silence Ruth never tried to fill. That silence grew inside Daniel, feeding his frustration. School felt like a slow trap, the streets a blur of routine, and his future, if he thought about it at all, seemed like a road leading nowhere. One of Daniel's only escapes was the freedom. He felt walking those same streets at dusk with Ife and Yomi, his closest friends, and finding something or someone to poke fun at. And no one served better than Mr. Adebanyo, the old man who lived like a ghost just down the street. To the boys, he was a living relic, frail, silent, and reclusive, with a house that looked like it hadn't seen joy in decades. Peeling paint, rusted gates, and dusty windows seemed to match the man's expressionless presence. People called him strange, bitter, cursed even. Children dared one another to run up to his door and knock before sprinting away in terror. It was a kind of folklore, a neighborhood game to make light of what they didn't understand. But Ruth, worn down by life and wise in ways Daniel didn't yet appreciate, wasn't amused. When she caught wind of her son mocking Mr. Adebanyo with the others, she had scolded him sharply. "Leave that man alone," she said, her voice firm with memory. "You don't know what people have survived." Her words clung to Daniel longer than he admitted. Still, he refused to see the old man as anything but a reflection of everything he hated: loneliness, silence, a lack of purpose. Mr. Adebanyo's quiet became, in Daniel's eyes, arrogance. It was as if the man had chosen to remove himself from the world while Daniel was being forced to live in one that felt increasingly hostile and empty. What Daniel didn't know was that Mr. Adebanyo had once been more than a ghost. A respected music teacher in his time, he had taught generations to find their voice till the day he lost his own. His wife had died suddenly 20 years ago, and the grief had hollowed him out. A falling out with his only child had sealed the silence. Since then, he had lived alone in that fading house, conducting imaginary orchestras in his mind and visiting memories like a daily ritual. One room remained padlocked, the basement, thick with secrets and sorrow, while the neighborhood moved on and reinvented its own narratives about the man. Mr. Adebanyo lived each day tethered to the past, watching as his story was rewritten, in whispers and jokes. Yet even from his window, he saw Daniel. The sharp tongue, the protective way he held his sister's hand, the haunted look he wore when he thought no one was watching. And something about the boy stirred a quiet recognition in Mr. Adebanyo, a note of something familiar in a song long forgotten. It was a slow, smouldering Ibadan afternoon, the kind that made even the dust seem tired. Daniel was walking home from the junction, kicking stones absently when he saw a familiar figure stumbling outside a rusted gate. Mr. Adebanyo, the old man's body wavered like a dying flame before crumpling to the ground. For a moment, the neighborhood froze. Doors stayed shut. Curtains moved slightly, eyes peeking but not stepping out. Daniel stood rooted, confused and strangely angry. Was no one going to help? The man lay sprawled, breathing shallowly, sweat soaking through his faded agbada. Against the instinct that told him to walk away, Daniel ran forward and knelt beside him. "Sir Baba," he called softly, shaking his frail shoulders. Mr. Adebanyo's eyes fluttered, then closed again. Without fully understanding why, Daniel lifted him, surprised by how light he was, how the bones seemed to rattle beneath the skin. He guided him inside the crumbling house, whose scent was a mix of dust, medicine, and something like old wood. As he helped Mr. Adebanyo into a worn chair, Daniel heard something stranger, soft melody floating through the air, delicate and aching, piano music, beautiful, precise. It seemed to come from below. His head turned instinctively toward the locked door at the base of the hall with the basement. No one else appeared to be inside. Mr. Adebanyo stirred and gripped Daniel's arm with surprising strength. "Don't open that door," he rasped, his voice dry as cracked earth. "Promise me." Daniel nodded, though he wasn't sure if it was a lie. He helped the old man sip water, arranged some pillows around him, then quietly let himself out. As he stepped into the street, the music still played in his mind, gentle notes woven with sadness, whispering stories without words. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay on his mattress, staring at the ceiling, hearing each piano note like a ghost tapping at his thoughts. Who was playing? Was it a recording, a memory, or something else entirely? Around midnight, he slipped out. Ruth and Tolu were asleep. The streets were quiet except for the occasional hum of a distant generator. He moved like a shadow, finding the loose panel in Mr. Adebanyo's back gate that he had noticed earlier. Carefully, he slipped through. The house loomed darker than before, its silence somehow louder. He stepped inside. The hallway creaked under his weight. The basement door stood before him, tall, wooden, locked with nothing but an old hook and eye latch. Slowly, with hesitant fingers, he unlatched it. The stairs groaned as he descended. With each step, the music grew louder. Not a recording. It was live, soft, practiced, aching. The basement opened into a small, dim room, and there, in the half-light, sat a boy, maybe Daniel's age, pale, thin, breathing through a machine. His fingers floated over the piano keys with a grace that felt like magic. Daniel froze, heart racing. The boy turned slightly, surprised but calm. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly. And in that moment, everything Daniel thought he knew about Mr. Adebanyo, about silence, about ghosts, changed. The basement smelled of time, old wood, forgotten dreams, and dust that clung to the air like ghosts. Daniel's eyes darted across the room. Thick shelves lined with cassette tapes, faded notebooks with curled edges, a piano draped in a thin sheet, and in one corner, a small wall covered in painted handprints. Tiny, colorful prints like someone had tried to freeze joy in place. He approached the shelf, his fingers tracing the label on a worn cardboard box. Kemi, 1994 to 1999. His breath caught. He pulled out a cassette from the box, slid it into the nearby tape deck, and pressed play. The hiss of static gave way to a child's voice, soft, clear, angelic, singing a Yoruba lullaby. Then came another voice, deeper, gentle, a younger. Mr. Adebanyo guiding her, harmonizing. Their voices danced together, full of warmth and something raw underneath. Hope, love, grief, yet to come. Daniel didn't move. He felt like an intruder in a sacred place. His elbow brushed a tower of tapes too fast. They tumbled to the ground with a sharp clatter. A shadow fell across him. He turned slowly, heart pounding. Mr. Adebanyo stood at the top of the stairs. No yelling, no anger, just a weariness in his eyes so deep it felt ancient. "I told you not to come down here," the old man said, voice rough. Daniel swallowed. I didn't mean to." But Mr. Adebanyo simply descended the steps. He moved slowly, but with purpose. Instead of scolding, he crossed the room, lifted the cover off the piano, and sat. He played a chord low, soft and aching, then another. The music filled the room like breath. "Her name was Kemi," he said finally. "My daughter. She died when she was 8. Daniel stood frozen. "She was a gift," Adebanyo continued. "Could play anything by ear. She used to sit right where you're standing. That wall." He pointed to the handprints. "Her idea. She said every good rehearsal should leave a mark." He chuckled. "Bitterly, we were driving home from a music competition in Ilerin. She won. I was so proud. It was raining. A drunk driver ran through a red light." He paused. "She died instantly. I lived." Silence stretched between them. Daniel's throat burned with something unnameable. "But that wasn't the end," Adebanyo said. "Her older brother, my son, Tund, blamed me. Said I forced her into music. Said I was obsessed. He left. I haven't heard from him in 20 years. He pressed a final chord. I kept this place to remember her, because the world forgot her." Daniel exhaled. He stepped closer, sat down beside him. No words, just quiet. That day changed everything. Daniel returned often, sometimes after school, sometimes sneaking away from home. They talked, played, laughed. Daniel asked about music, about how to write chords that carried emotion. Mr. Adebanyo, with patient hands, showed him, slowly, carefully, like teaching a blind man how to see color. Then one day, Daniel brought to Lou. She danced around the piano, sang in her scratchy little voice, and left her own handprint on the wall. The sound of children's laughter returned to the house for the first time in decades. Soon, neighbors noticed Daniel coming and going. "Tolu too," whispers began. Low at first. "That old man's too friendly with those kids. What's he hiding in that basement?" Then, louder, crueler. "Something's not right with him. Didn't his family all disappear? Maybe he did something." One evening, Daniel came home to find Ruth waiting with crossed arms, fury in her eyes. "You've been going to his house, Mum." "He's not. I don't care what he is. He's an old man with secrets and no family. You want to end up like that. He lost his family. That's why he's alone." But Ruth wouldn't hear it, and she wasn't alone. Parents began pulling their children closer. The church women's group warned each other. Mr. Adebanyo's name returned to the neighborhood's blacklist. When Daniel told him, the old man didn't flinch. He simply nodded, looked down at the keys, and said, "This place has always known how to bury what it doesn't understand." Daniel clenched his fists. But you're not doing anything wrong. We just play music. Mr. Adebanyo looked at him gently. Sometimes that's the greatest threat of all. And still, Daniel returned. Because sometimes ghosts weren't dead things. They were memories that never got sung. The sirens came quietly, almost politely, as if shame should arrive on tiptoe. One afternoon, without warning, a black government vehicle pulled up in front of Mr. Adebanyo's crumbling house. 2 uniformed child protection officers stepped out. Neighbors peeked through windows, lifting curtains with suspicion already brewing in their eyes. Minutes later, the officers emerged with Mr. Adebanyo between them, wrist bound, face still, not a word uttered. The street buzzed. I knew it, someone muttered. He always looked the type, another added. Daniel ran up the street, breathless and confused, only to arrive as the door slammed shut and the vehicle pulled away. He shouted, "Wait, what happened?" But no one answered him. Later, whispers painted the full picture. Anonymous calls, reports of inappropriate behavior, suspicions fueled by months of gossip and paranoia. Daniel tried to speak up, but no one listened. Even Ruth, his mother, pulled him aside that evening, eyes tight with fear and disbelief. What were you doing in his house, Daniel? Why the basement? Daniel stammered. He's not like that, Mum. He was just teaching me music. That's all, but she wasn't convinced. He lives alone, he doesn't talk to anyone, and suddenly he's inviting kids into his house. Can you blame people for asking questions? You always told me not to judge people before knowing what they've survived. Daniel snapped back. But the seed of doubt had been planted. At the jail, Mr. Adebanyo sat in a metal chair, silent. His lips didn't move, his eyes didn't rise. When Daniel begged the officers to let him speak with him, they refused. He doesn't want to talk, won't answer questions, not even to a lawyer. Frustrated, angry, Daniel did the only thing he could think of. He broke into the house, climbing through the same panel in the back gate he'd used months before. Inside, the house was colder now, hollow in a different way. The piano was covered again, but the basement door hung ajar, the lock broken during the arrest. Daniel stepped down the stairs, his flashlight shaking. He gathered the tapes, Kemi's songs, the duets, the recordings of father and daughter preserving their love in melody. He stuffed them in his backpack and left. That Saturday, Daniel stood in the neighborhood square beneath the concrete statue of a forgotten leader. He had dragged out his uncle's old generator and a set of borrowed speakers. A cassette deck sat on the table beside him. Curious neighbors gathered, drawn by the noise, the odd setup, the boy standing there like a preacher with no pulpit. He said nothing at first, just pressed play. The soft static of the tape filled the air. Then, the voice clear, young, trembling with beauty, Kemi singing a lullaby. The square went still. Then Mr. Adebanyo's voice joined hers, younger, vibrant. They laughed mid-song, corrected each other, harmonized. People listened, eyes widened. Daniel stepped forward and faced the crowd. That's Kemi, his daughter. She died when she was 8. And this, he gestured to the sound. This is all he had left of her. He paused. You mocked him, lied on him, threw stones at his house, called him Ghost Man. Why? Because he was old. Because he didn't talk much. Because he kept to himself. He pointed at the speakers. That man didn't lure anyone. He wasn't hiding something sinister. He was keeping his daughter alive the only way he knew how, through music. The tape played on. The song shifted into a second piece, more upbeat, Kemi attempting to rap, giggling through the lines. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman began to cry. Ruth stepped forward, tears running down her face. Tolu clutched Daniel's hand tightly, her eyes wide and glistening. Silence settled over the square like dusk. Daniel's voice cracked as he finished. You locked him away because you didn't understand him, because fear is easier than truth. But that man saved me. gave me something to believe in, something to feel proud of. Someone in the crowd clapped, then another. Slowly, hands rose in uncertain rhythm. Not just applause, penance, apology. In that moment, Daniel didn't care if the police still held him. He didn't care if the rumors lingered. The music had spoken. The truth had been heard. And maybe, just maybe, a man's name had begun to be cleared by the very voice he thought the world had forgotten. The charges against Mr. Adebanyo were eventually dropped. The evidence crumbled under the weight of truth and community support. Some neighbors came forward to apologize quietly, though many were too ashamed to face him directly, their guilt hanging heavy in the air like a thick fog. When Mr. Adebanyo was released from jail, the ordeal had taken a serious toll on his health. His steps were slower, his hands a little shakier, but the bitterness that once consumed him had softened into something quieter, more peaceful. With Daniel's help, they transformed the basement into a free music space for children, a sanctuary filled with instruments, sheet music, and light where laughter and melodies replaced silence and suspicion. Tolu was the first student, her bright eyes shining as she learned piano under Mr. Adebanyo's gentle guidance. Inspired by the journey and the healing music brought them, Daniel began writing and recording again, composing his first song, a heartfelt tribute to lost daughters, broken fathers, and the families they found in one another. Then, unexpectedly, a message arrived. Mr. Adebanyo's estranged son, Tund, having seen the video of the neighborhood gathering online, reached out. It was tentative, hesitant, but it cracked open a door to reconciliation that both had thought forever closed, hinting at a future where wounds might heal and music could finally bridge the silence between them. Months after the storm of doubt, judgment, and pain that had enveloped the neighborhood, the once divided community found itself gathered in the very square where whispers and rumors had once filled the air with suspicion, where laughter had too often carried a sharp edge of cruelty and exclusion. This time, however, the air was thick with anticipation and warmth, as a community concert blossomed into a vibrant celebration of music, healing, and renewal. Children, their faces alight with joy and nervous excitement, took turns performing, under the soft glow of makeshift lanterns and string lights that crisscrossed above, casting a gentle golden hue over the crowd. Parents, neighbors, and even those who had once scorned or ignored the quiet old man from the crumbling house now sat side by side, clapping and cheering, some with tears silently trailing down their cheeks as the music wove a delicate thread of unity through their hearts. Among them stood Daniel, no longer the restless teenager burdened with anger and abandonment, but a young man transformed by understanding, forgiveness, and a newfound purpose. He stood just behind the piano where the melodies he had come to love so deeply would soon begin to flow once again, and beside him, seated with careful support, was Mr. Adebanyo, the once ghost man of the neighborhood now visibly frail, his frame diminished by years of sorrow and recent hardship, yet his eyes shining with a quiet pride and contentment that only healing and connection could bring. As the children's voices rose in song, filling the cool evening with hauntingly beautiful harmonies, Mr. Adebanyo leaned toward Daniel and, in a whisper barely audible over the music, yet heavy with meaning, said, "She would have loved this." Daniel's heart swelled with emotion as he nodded, a soft smile touching his lips as he replied, "She started it, a tribute not only to Kemi, the daughter whose memory had preserved their fractured lives, but also to the power of music to bridge gaps, mend wounds, and create family where there once was isolation." The camera's eye, if it had been there, would have slowly pulled away, capturing the transformation in this humble corner of Ibadan, a place once shadowed by suspicion and silence, now alive with light and sound, laughter and applause, the basement beneath Mr. Adebanyo's house glowing as a beacon of hope, filled with music and children's dreams. The crowd's cheers mingled with the lingering notes of the piano, echoing far beyond the narrow streets, telling a story of resilience and redemption. Faces once hardened by grief and prejudice softened, hands once closed in judgment opened in celebration. The air carried a palpable sense of renewal, a quiet promise that from loss and misunderstanding, something beautiful could emerge, something that would endure far beyond the fleeting moments of the concert. Daniel glanced at Mr. Adebayo, their eyes meeting in a shared understanding that this was more than music. It was a testament to survival, love, and the courage to confront the past and forge a new path together. Around them, the children's laughter mingled with the fading twilight, weaving a tapestry of sound and hope that would linger long after the lights dimmed and the square emptied, carrying forward the legacy of a father and daughter's love, a neighborhood's healing, and the power of music to illuminate even the darkest corners of the human soul. As the night deepened, the community remained wrapped in this fragile, glowing moment of unity, the echoes of songs softly fading into the starry sky, while below the basement doors stood open wide, no longer a place of secrets and sorrow, but a sanctuary where dreams could grow and the healing could continue. And so, with a final, lingering note, the scene faded to black, leaving behind the quiet certainty that some stories, like music itself, never truly end, they only transform, echoing on in hearts and lives, forever carrying the light of those who dared to believe and to love.